Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake Glory First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Linda McFadden. I'll be chairing this hearing. I'm joined today by panel members Brent McIntyre and Liz Nesbitt on Zoom. Representing the assessment department is Darren Ducharme, and our administrative personnel is Louise Boilly. We have no Zoom. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal for your property to be addressed following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decision. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 7 on our docket today. Ms. Boilly, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please stand. Please state your full name.
Darren Ducharme.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, please stand. Please state your full name. Do you affirm that the evidence that you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to the first item on our agenda. It's 1122 Pembina Highway. I don't believe there are any preliminary issues to be addressed today. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. The file number is 22-2773. The roll number is 030-913-11800. The address is 1122 Pembina. For the roll year 2023 with a reference of April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $7,753,000. The parcel use is CMRNS, a neighborhood shopping center. Zoning is C2. We have a leasable area of 21,231 square feet. And I have a recommendation to reduce the 2023 assessed value to $7,467,000.
And that's based on?
A rental adjustment.
Could you repeat that number? Sorry.
$7,467,000.
Mr. Reimer?
Very much appreciate that, Madam Chair. I think we'll need to proceed, notwithstanding the recommendation. Thank you.
All right.
On page 2, we have a few aerial photos of the subject property. The subject has newer improvements completed in 2007, and it's located in the Point Road neighborhood. On page 3, we have a few street view photos of the subject property on 1122 Pembina, showing the two different buildings. On page 4, request for information, and then we have the subject sales history. On page 5, we have our rent comparables for the subject property. You'll note that the comparables reflect and are of similar types to that of the tenants of the subject property. For the coffee chain comparables, we have rents from $43.91 per square feet to $45 per square feet. They all have drive-throughs, as does the subject. The comparable at 2750 Pembina would be most similar to the subject in that it is closest in terms of both location and size. For the pharmacy drugstore chain, the comparables range from $22.50 per square foot to $28 per square foot. Our model's at $23.62 per square foot. These comparables are all relatively equidistant from the subject and of similar size to the subject, which is 17,006 square feet. For the dental office comparables, the rents range from $24.75 square feet to $29 per square feet. Our model's at $26.01 per square feet. The comparables at 40 Lakewood and 2855 Pembina are both approximately 8 kilometers from the subject. 50 Sage Creek's a little further at 11, and the comparables are also a similar size to the subject, which is 2,510 square feet. On page 6 is the subject property income summary, which I have revised. The revision was in regards to the coffee chain tenant, where after the market data reviews determined that the rent was too aggressive. So the rent for that was changed to the actual rent for the tenant. So the change was, I'll just walk through the change there. The change, if you look at premise ID 30125, the rent was changed from $50.18 per square feet to $38.50 per square feet, which is the actual rent. This gives a potential rent change from $86,059 to $66,028. This changed the potential rent from $553,026 to $532,995. The vacancy stays the same at 5%. Expenses remain the same at 3%. The shortfall at $9 per square foot is the same. The net operating income changes from $500,060 to $481,601. We've applied a cap rate of 6.45%, giving an estimated value change from $7,753,000 rounded to $7,467,000 rounded. On page 7, we have our capitalization rate chart. You'll note that the cap rate we've applied to the subject property is 6.45%, which is within the 20th to 80th percentile for the city of Winnipeg and within the low to high ranges of the other reports provided. We feel the 6.45% cap applied is fair, given the newer build of the improvement for the property, which was completed in 2007. Page 8, our Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 9 through 22 are the 2020 subject property income and expense mailers that have been returned to our department. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Romer, do you have questions?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Ducharme, just want to make very sure we've narrowed the issues, I'm sure now. So the total, with your recommendation, the total potential rent is $532,995. Is that the number that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, Madam Chair, my questions will focus entirely on cap rate and non-recoverable. That's the only remaining issues in this case. So, with respect to now the expense rate of, and I'm now on your page 6. The expense rate of 3%, that of course is model driven, correct?
That's correct.
as is the cap rate of 6.45?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Ducharme, and again, Madam Chair, I propose just to ask the questions once and ask that it be carried forward. So, Mr. Ducharme, the department has, of course, submitted the conclusions and a summary page on your page 7 of the capitalization rate range, but the department hasn't provided you with any specific capitalization rate detail as to the addresses of the properties, the potential rents applied, all of the parameters applied. I don't see any of that in your evidence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Madam Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions either. Thank you.
And I have any questions. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could I ask the board members and Mr. Ducharme to please initially turn to page 15 of our main submission? And again, I appreciate Mr. Ducharme taking the time to review the property. What's happened with the recommendation then? Our potential rent actually is higher than the potential rent applied by Mr. Ducharme with his recommendation. So he was at $532,995. So you can see on page 15, we're at a rate total potential market income of $539,721 based on the rents being achieved. So based upon the application of that potential income, the vacancy allowance, we are applying the market rate of 5%, shortfall at $9, which is also as assessed and consistent with the market indicators. The difference, of course, then the differences I should say relate to two items. One is the non-recoverable expense. We've applied 5% plus 2% for quote unquote other or structural reserve. And we've also applied a higher capitalization rate. So I'll limit my comments to those issues and ask that the comments concerning both items be carried forward. So with respect then to the non-recoverable expense study, if I might ask the board members and Mr. Ducharme to very briefly join me in that study, and Madam Chair, let me know when you're there.
Sorry, expense?
The non-recoverable expense study, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, and I will be brief. Bottom of page 2 are fundamentally, as we've heard in the past, our submission is based on the concept that this expense item was always intended to be not quote unquote management fees, which we're not disputing are recovered, but rather as truly non-recoverable expenses, even under net lease terms. And at the bottom of page 2, there's an excerpt from the assessor's previous manual dating back some years that states even with net leases and competent management, there'll still be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants, such as processing payments and chasing bad debts. And in our case, we've got a standard list of items that we've applied. We then looked at appraisal theory, and if we skip to page 4, second last paragraph on page 4, in the case studies and appraisal states, the appraiser should also account for non-recoverable expenses. The most important non-recoverable cost items to be aware of are space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducements and leasing costs, and an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. The other costs associated with leasing space is leasing fees or commissions, and commissions do certainly form a cornerstone of our analysis that we presented in this case. We've got on page 7 then, this is from the Saskatchewan appraisal, Saskatchewan assessment manual. They list 4 different expenses that they that are typically not recovered from tenants, which are legal and audit fees, which we've also included, the structural repairs, which in our submission is covered by the 2% allowance, advertising and promotion, which again we've included in leasing commissions. So if we then go to page 10, we've listed the 4 items, Madam Chair, that are included in our analysis. Those are leasing commissions, professional fees, in some very limited cases, asset management fees, they don't arise often, and advertising marketing. So then on page 11, this is the results of our analysis, and it was based, notwithstanding the titles, the headings, it's actually based on between 4 and 6 years of data. The right-hand column includes tenant inducements. We're not, and I've said this before, stress it, we're not relying on that column. We're providing it for information. The second column from the right represents the analysis and the average percentages over the timeframes we looked at for just those 4 items that we list on page 10. So that, as you can see at the bottom, it averages 6.64% with a median of 5.98, and we believe the 5% remains appropriate. Then moving to pages, and this is, you're welcome certainly to turn the pages, but I'll go through it at a very high level, pages 12 through 15. It's important to note that in our retail capitalization rate study, we have applied the full 5% non-recoverable allowance in our analysis. And if one reduces that allowance from 5% to 1%, which is consistent with the approach taken by the department for this cycle, it has a direct impact on the cap rate conclusions in our analysis. So I present three examples. If one uses the very same assumptions from top to bottom, that being potential rent all the way through to the sale price, and if the only difference, the only change among those assumptions relates to the non-recoverable expenses, as you can see on page 13, was the full 5% applied using the assumptions that we list at the top of page 13, the indicated cap rate is 7.38%. If then on page 14, if you reduce the expense, that expense from 5 to 0, the indicated capitalization rate using those very same assumptions is 7.79%, an increase of 41 basis points. If you then turn to page 15, which is probably the most relevant for our purposes, if you reduce the non-recoverable expense from 5 to 1, then the indicated cap rate for using those same assumptions is 7.71%, which is an increase of 33 basis points. So for the purpose of our submissions this afternoon, what we're requesting, if the board chooses to reduce the non-recoverable expense items from 5 to 1, then we're requesting that our capitalization rate request be increased by 25 basis points for the reasons just cited. So that is the non-recoverable. If we might then, Madam Chair, turn briefly to our retail capitalization rate study. And again, if you might let me know when you're there.
To go.
Thank you. Mr. Ducharme, you good? Okay, awesome. And again, I know the board members, Mr. Ducharme, I know you've heard this many, many times. I'm going to keep it very brief. Happy to answer any questions, though, if I haven't gone over something that you would like to discuss in the study. If we start on page 5, please, of the study, and there's some commentary around the retail environment pre-pandemic. And on page 5, towards the middle of the page, we talk about the article involving RioCan, which was Canada's largest retail REIT, in October of 2017. So a few years before the reference date and a couple of years before the onset of the pandemic. And they talked about the disposition of a number of properties by RioCan. And in the indented paragraphs at the middle of the page, the article states the recently announced sale of 100 properties by RioCan, Canada's largest retail REIT, suggests that retail as an asset class is losing steam. If guidance for the future for retail in Canada is to be taken from this change in direction for RioCan, it may be that retail as an asset class is a questionable focus, given RioCan's move towards a more diversified portfolio that will include residential. In essence, RioCan's moving away from retail as a focus and is now looking to become entrenched in the type of live, work, play lifestyle centers that have been topical over the past number of years, not least of which because of the potential headwinds that retail may face. And these, of course, were headwinds they were commenting on prior to the pandemic. If we then move, please, to page 8. And certainly, this is now getting into sort of the retail environment during the pandemic. And one of the trends that was certainly gaining momentum prior to the pandemic was an increasing tendency for shoppers to shop online whenever and wherever they could in favor of actually attending bricks and mortar stores. And bottom of page 8, and again, I'm reading through this quickly to make sure that I'm proceeding at a reasonable pace. Bottom of page 8, there was an article from University Canada West, and this was again during the pandemic. States the COVID-19 pandemic has changed how we buy things. With so many people staying home and most brick and mortar stores closed, we've been shopping less overall. But when we do shop, it's been increasingly from computers, tablets, and phones. In March of 2020, that is, the most recent month with available information at that time, Canadian retail e-commerce sales totaled 2.2 billion, up 40% from a year ago, Statistics Canada said, and that was despite a 10% drop in retail sales overall. Certainly that momentum with respect to the online shopping had been significantly enhanced because of the circumstances necessitated by the pandemic. On page 9, we there was an article by Redshift Media, and I forgot to mention these materials are in our attachments should the board members wish to refer to them in more detail in their deliberations. Redshift Media reported on the very likely very permanent changes to the retail industry, and they've got a chart in the middle of page 9 that talks about some of the trends that they saw. You can see there the roughly, and I'm trying to read the numbers with my eyes that aren't as good as they used to be. I believe that's 51% under the shopping online bar, which is the first bar on the left-hand side at the top. We're shopping online more frequently, 41%, about the same, and actually a very small percentage said, I'm guessing 1 to 2% less frequently. And ordering products online to pick up at store, again, 35% were suggesting they were doing that more frequently. And the food and beverage industry, of course, was significantly impacted. On the right-hand side, they talk about some of those trends. 56% said what they were consuming food and drinks at home more frequently. 51% said they were baking and cooking at home more frequently. And 37% stated they were ordering food for pickup or delivery more frequently. So, and of course, when you talk about going out to restaurants or bars, you can see on the very bottom chart on the bar on the right-hand side, fully 60% were saying they were doing that less frequently, which certainly stands to reason in the context of the pandemic. The study at the bottom of page 9 goes on to indicate that a lot of these trends were likely continue indefinitely. States' buying habits have dramatically changed since the pandemic began. 85% of Canadians say that their shopping behavior has been affected by COVID-19, while 50% report they're now making online purchases for typical in-store items. Most importantly, 53% of North Americans say they've changed the way they will shop going forward, indicating that the shifts that have taken place over the pandemic will have lasting impacts on retail. If we go to page 10 then, there was a CBC News report, and this was in July of 2020, so a few months on into the pandemic, and it talks about online shopping, and the term that they'd use is that the online shopping had exploded during the pandemic. A new report from StatsCan found that total retail sales fell by 17.9% as Canadians increasingly sheltered in place between February and May. Even so, shoppers rushed to make online purchases, with sales surging 99% during that period. StatsCan says e-commerce sales hit a record $3.9 billion in May, a 2.3% increase over April and a 99% increase over February. E-commerce sales more than doubled year over year. The record gains, and this is the third paragraph now, the record gains in e-commerce occurred as total retail sales experienced record declines, the report says, with April data showing the most stark contrast. Retail sales that month plummeted to $33.9 billion, down 29% from February and 26.4% from the prior year. Meanwhile, e-commerce increased 63% in April. And at the bottom of page 10, I'll just point this out. There's a PwC puts out, some basically annually a very good study. It's called Emerging Trends in Real Estate. And they stated that the interviewees that they had are seeing a structural shift in retail, but it's an acceleration of the move towards e-commerce already underway. So this move to e-commerce and certainly the potentials, and what we'll see in the docket this afternoon is there is a number of properties that would, some of which would be more vulnerable to these trends than others, but certainly would have an impact in the retail sector generally. If we then move briefly to page 14, please. And this was a report in January of 21, so now certainly well into the pandemic by the Retail Insider. And you'll see the highlighted headline. It says, "No online store, no revenues." And immediately beneath that, they say the retailers that relied solely on sales in stores were rapidly falling. When it all started, everyone was hoping it would simply come and go. But when the reality hit that this was here to stay for a while, those who believed they would weather it through their savings found themselves with nothing left to weather the second wave. And at the top, page 15, and then there's a number of paragraphs from that article there, but at the top of page 15, the article goes on to say, despite the upbeat outlook for some retailers, between 160 and 225,000 small businesses could permanently close because of the COVID-19 restrictions, according to the CFIB. And at the bottom of page 15, it's an interesting conclusion. It's states a transformation in the retail industry has been happening slowly over the past several years, but the pandemic accelerated the sea change, and this is the move to e-commerce. It was moving slowly before. Hutchison said we're starting to see, bits and pieces, and it's really just accelerated at warp speed during the pandemic. Starting at page 16, then, Altus Group had the opportunity to conduct 2 sets of interviews with some very, very significant real estate owners and managers, the top managers and investors in the country. One of the first study was conducted in April of 2020, a couple of months into the pandemic, and the second one was in November. And some of the conclusions or the projections from these interviews was very interesting. At the top of page 17, you can see there's a pronounced lack of optimism as to the effect of all of this on market rents. As you can see there's a number of categories that are listed, and the red bar indicating the projection that market rents for 2021 would decrease. Obviously, the red being the most significant of the responses. Then going to page 18. Pages 18 and 19, there were some, one of the questions that was asked of these individuals was the expectation with respect to capitalization rates. And for the top quality product at the bottom of page 18, as you can see by the blue bar representing the November survey results, the majority of the respondents indicated they expected 25 to 50 basis point increases for top quality properties, with significant percentages also suggesting that increases of between 50 and even 100 basis points or 75 to 100 basis points would be possible. Some respondents actually thought cap rates would compress, as you can see by the blue bars, but they were very much in the minority. Page 19, then, for the lower quality retail centers, the expectations were predictably even worse still. The November's respondents, as you can see, they were again expecting 25 to 50 basis point decreases. Roughly just over 40% had come to that conclusion, but a very, very significant number now had shifted to even higher or expectations of higher increases in cap rates. Nearly 30% thought it would now be 50 to 75 basis points, and roughly 20% even as high as 75 to 100 basis points. So in that context, with the pandemic and the effects on the retail industry, I ask the board, Mr. Ducharme, to turn to page 24. So page 24 is our capitalization rate analysis, the conclusions from the analysis, and every single one of these, the analysis for each individual property, again, is attached to the appendices. The right-hand column, Madam Chair, and recall I'd provided the examples where the indicated cap rate is different if you assume 1% for non-recoverable expenses versus the 5% we've applied. So the right-hand column actually is the capitalization rate conclusion if one reduces the non-recoverable from 5 to 1, and then it applies a total non-recoverable expense for both the non-recoverable and other expense of 3%. The second from the right-hand column it's labeled Altus cap, and that is based on the application of the full 5% allowance. So as you can see there were a couple of cap rates that were south of 6%, but certainly the majority of them were in the 6.4 and upwards of, in one case, 8.42. That would be at the higher end, but between 6.4 and 7.4%. So then, the properties associated with these transactions, they start at page 25 and continue through to page 31. So then if we go briefly to page 32, our capitalization rate conclusions. In this case, the top quality retail properties would have, in our submission, have a range of between 6.25 and 6.75. The standard quality 6.75 to 7.25, and the lower quality 7.5 to 8. That's again all assuming that the 5% non-recoverable allowance is applied. So with that information, then, if we could go back briefly to our main submission and then back to page 15. So on page 15, you can see that the capitalization rate that we've applied in this case is 6.75%, which is at the upper end of the high quality retail. The reason that we have applied, we've suggested this property is at the highest quality. There were two market sectors within retail, and this was commented on a number of the articles I researched. They talked about the pandemic's effects generally, which was very devastating, but they said two types of assets were able to certainly do better than some of the remainder of the assets that were not faring well. They involved grocery anchored properties or drugstore anchored properties. So in this case, the Shoppers is in fact the anchor for the property, and that in our respectful submission puts it in the top quality category. The rents that are being applied here in our submission, we believe are certainly premium rents. The Starbucks at $38.50, representing most certainly what we believe is a premium rent. And therefore, with those premium rents, we're applying the capitalization rate at the upper end of the high quality range to account for the risk to the income streams, in this case being the premium rents. So with that then in mind, we're requesting a reduction to a value of $6,923,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Mr. Sharm?
Yes, I do. On page 22.
Main submission, right?
Yes, main submission. Page 22, the COVID questionnaire. The owner states, or answers the question, please indicate the extent to which COVID-19 pandemic and related health measures have impacted the operation of this property. They check minor impact, correct?
Indeed.
Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah.
Mr. McIntyre,
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt,
No questions.
and I have no questions. Any desire to summarize? No?
Just ask those comments be carried forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the second item on our prospects, that would be 1181 Pembina Highway. Mr. Ducharme, when you're ready.
The roll number is 22-1005. The roll number is 0307-169-3000. The address is 1181 Pembina. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $2,315,000. The parcel use is neighborhood shopping center. Zoning is C2, and we have a leasable area of 15,000 square feet. Recommendation is to maintain the 2023 assessed value. On page 2, we have some aerial views of the subject property located at 1181 Pembina. The top photo is a parcel view of the subject property on the west side of Pembina. And then the bottom pictures are aerial photos of the front and back of the subject property. Page 3, we have a few street view photos of the subject property from a few different angles, heading south along Pembina Highway. Page 4 are the requests for income information on the subject sales history. On page 5 are rent comparables. As you'll note, all the comparables are located on the same street as the subject property. All the comparables are in close proximity to the subject property, with the furthest being approximately 3 kilometers away, 1921 Pembina. All comparables have the same parcel use code as the subject. All comparables have the same zoning as the subject. The first comparable, 1295 Pembina, is in the same neighborhood as the subject. The comparables 669, 679, 681, 685, and 756 are located in an adjacent neighborhood to the subject. The comparables range in area from 1,000 square feet to 3,600 square feet, which are similar to the subject. And the rents range from $14 per square foot to $22 per square foot, with a mean of $16.17 per square foot. On page 6 is the subject property income summary. We have a total leasable area of 15,000 square feet, giving a potential rent of $210,060. This is produces a blended rate of $14 per square feet. We have a vacancy loss of 6%. We have expenses at 3%. We have a shortfall at $7 per square feet, giving a net operating income of $185,232. We've applied a cap rate of 8%, giving an estimated value of $2,315,000 rounded. On page 7, our capitalization chart. Again, we've applied an 8% cap rate to the subject property, which you'll note is above the high end for the retail for all reports. Page 8 is a Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And pages 9 through 17 are the subject property 2020 income and expense mailers that were returned. I believe the property is owned and operated by the tenant Royal Realty. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could I ask the non-recoverable component? Thanks very much, Mr. Ducharme, for your presentation. So we can agree that our evaluation date called the reference date in the legislation is April 1 of 2021, correct?
Yes.
So when we're looking for market indicators, one component of determining how much relevance a market indicator would have would be the proximity in time between the lease or the lease renewal date and the reference date.
Correct.
And I'll phrase it as an open question, but certainly we can agree that with respect to properties generally, and certainly retail properties, the location and quality of the property would have a bearing on the rents as well, would it not?
Yes.
Okay. Now you've supplied, as I have, the income and expense questionnaire that was provided to the department by the owner. And on your page 14, I believe this is the rent roll that was supplied in connection with the 2020 income and expense questionnaire, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think, Mr. Ducharme, you're exactly right. I'm treating Royal Realty Services as the owner occupant, effectively, notwithstanding that they put a rent in there, but I'm agreeing with you on that. With respect to then the third party arm's length tenancies, the second tenant we can see had a lease start date of October of 2019, correct?
Yes.
Okay, which is roughly, I'll call it 17 months prior to the reference date.
Right.
And the local lash, the next one down, had a lease starting in June of 2020, correct?
Correct.
And finally, the CR Computers lease, actually not finally, the second from the bottom, CR Computers, that lease started in June of 19.
Correct.
Under a month-to-month term. And finally, then the Eiffel Tower started in January of 2020.
Correct.
So those leases, and I don't know if you had a chance to review them, but I take it that what the model had presented as far as the rents that were applied in this case, they weren't in any way modified by a review of these specific leases that were very near the reference date, correct?
I wouldn't know.
Okay, fair enough. But to be clear, the valuation on your page 6 is entirely model driven, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Madam Chair, those are my questions. I'll present the rest. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt.
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I have no questions. Mr. Reimer.
Madam Chair, if I could ask the panel members, Mr. Ducharme, to now initially turn to page 11, please. So in this case, just to frame the discussion, there's the non-recoverable issue, which is going to be common throughout, but the only other issue under examination for this particular property relates to the potential income to be applied. So you can see roughly the middle of page 11, we've applied a potential income of $153,040, which is the single biggest difference by far in our respective valuations. In the chart on page 11 there, and recall that I was asking Mr. Ducharme with respect to the timelines relative to the reference date. The reason for that is you can see in the chart, there were a total of 4. The first tenant is Royal Realty, and I'm treating that as owner occupied space. The tenants, the second, third, fifth, and sixth tenants, though, were based upon leases negotiated at the subject very near the reference date, and in fact, at points in time that were as close as or closer to the reference date than the department's comparable. So I certainly suggest those provide the best indicators, bar none, of the achievable net rent for the subject property. When for the board's reference, we always try and run a check on these rents at the top of page 12. There's a number of properties there, similar vintage retail properties with the rental rate range of between $6.75 a foot and $14.80. The average net rent we've applied based on the rents in place are $10.20, well within that range. Madam Chair, don't forget that the department's put an effective age of 1980, but the original construction of this building was 1953. So we are talking about, at the end of the day, a building that's obviously had work done to it to make it as attractive as possible, but it's certainly a building that the original construction is substantially older. So then if we turn to page 14, please. We've applied a $9 rent to the Royal Realty space. That's the owner occupied space. That's a unit of 3,500 square feet. And our benchmark for that was based upon the other large unit in the center, which is the very last unit with the Eiffel Tower at $8 a foot, slightly larger unit. So we believe that $9 was appropriate. So with the application of the $9 market rent to that space and the remaining rents in place as indicated earlier, we then come in at a potential rent of $153,040 and running it through using the parameters shown there, including the 5% non-recoverable and the 8% cap, we arrive at a value of $1,576,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ducharme, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre.
I just have one question. On page 12, you're showing the median net rent to be $12.78, yet you've picked $10.30 a square foot.
I indeed have, Mr. McIntyre, based upon the leases that were negotiated in 2019 and 2020, very near the reference date. So I'm not relying on these averages. I'm writing a check to ensure that the rents that are being achieved are not, are within the rental range. So first and foremost, I am relying on those very specific indicators near the reference date of the subject and suggesting that they overall certainly fall within that range.
Okay, and these the leases that you have on page 11, start date of October 19, 2019, June of 2020. Are these new tenants to the building?
Let me go to page. I'm going to direct you, Mr. McIntyre, to 2 pages, if I might.
Certainly.
The first page is page number 23, please. So page 23 is the very same page that I was referencing in Mr. Ducharme's submission earlier. So this is the 2020 rent roll. So there you see the lease start dates that I'm referencing. If you then turn, and I'll keep this page open for reference, but if you could then turn to page 32. And so on page 32, there's the indication of the tenants that were in there prior for the previous submission. So what I can tell you is that the tenant Soka Gekai, oh, I hope I said that right, was that would have been a renewal. The tenant Local Lash, that's a new tenant. The tenant Eiffel Tower is a renewal. The tenant CR Computers went on an overhaul basis in June of 2019. So they were a pre-existing tenant that switched to a month-to-month tenancy at that point. So there were a combination of lease renewals and new leases coming into the building based on that information.
So that leads me to my last question. So for the new tenants coming into the building, was there any renovations to accommodate them for the space they were leasing?
Quick answer is I don't know. It would be very uncommon for a tenant to take space really as is. So I would expect at the very least the units would have been refreshed for their purposes, but I don't have those details.
Okay, thank you very much. That was all my questions.
Ms. Nesbitt,
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
and my only question is that I see that both you and the assessor have given this property a cap rate of 8%. Would it not be accurate that a higher cap rate like that would, to some extent, offset be in fact reflecting the lower rents? So that to have the lowest rent rate and the much higher cap rate is a little bit of double.
I agree.
Reduction.
I agree, because it's always an integrated, you can't look at one parameter.
Correct.
So Madam Chair, I don't disagree with that.
Okay,
I don't believe, certainly I don't come out to the same value as the current assessment, but I'm going to put it this way. If you recall, I would treat this property as what would be categorized as a lower quality property, especially if you recall there's 2 month-to-month tenants. This is the type of property where we're talking about elevated risk.
right.
So with that in mind, you need not turn there, but recall that my comments on the lower quality properties, the upper end of the cap range was, and I'll make sure I quote it very accurately, I think it was 775. The range was 7.5 to 8. Your point is well received, and I agree with it. So I'm going to suggest this so if the board members and Mr. Descharmes, if you might take note, my NOI shown on page 14 is 126,049, so that wouldn't change. I'm going to suggest this because fundamentally I agree with you. 1,681,000 as a request, and that is based on the lower quality characterization of the building, but a cap rate at the lower end of that, which is 7.5%. So if you take the 126,049 and you cap it at 7.5, which I believe would be appropriate, it's 1,681,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions. Any wish to summarize?
Nothing else.
Moving on then to the third item on the agenda, which would be 1601 Pembina Highway. When you're ready, Mr. Descharmes.
Thank you. The file number is 22-1654. The roll number is 030-912-15700. The address is 1601 Pembina Highway. For the roll year 2023 with a reference date April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of 1,326,000. The parcel use is a neighborhood shopping center. The zoning is C2, and we have a leasable area of 8,545 square feet. Our recommendation is to maintain the 2023 assessed value. On page 2, we have a few aerial photos of the subject property at 1601 Pembina at the intersection of Chevrier Boulevard. On page 3, we have a few street view photos of the subject property from a few different angles. The bottom photo includes the triangular shape that's included for the subject property, which appears to be used for additional parking. Page 4, we have requests for information and a subject sales history. Page 5, we have our rent comparables. All the comparables are located on the same street as the subject property. All the comparables are the same parcel use code as a subject. All the comparables are zoned the same as the subject. The comparables provided are in relatively close proximity in area of the tenants of the subject property. Page 6 is the subject property income summary. We have a total leasable area of 8,545 square feet, giving a potential rent of $111,568. This is a 1306 or producing at $13.06 per square foot blended rate. The vacancy loss is 6%. Expenses are 3%. Shortfall at $7 per square foot, giving a net operating income of $98,139. We've applied a overall cap rate of 7.40%, giving an estimated value of $1,326,000 rounded. On page 7 is our cap rate chart. You'll notice the 7.40% that's being applied to this subject property is at or above the high end of the chart for all reports for retail for the neighborhood. Page 8 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 9 through 15 are the 2020 income and expense mailers that have been returned. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
So Madam Chair, non-recoverable and cap rate please asked and answered. And Mr. Ducharme, this was entirely model driven, correct?
Yes.
That's my question, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Thank you. I have no questions either.
I have no questions. Please go ahead, Mr. Reimer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Ducharme to go straight to page 14, please. I hadn't taken the time, nor would I intend to take the time to ask a lot of questions on the rent comparables. And the reason for that, Madam Chair, is we're within $2,700 or so in rent. So the potential rent you'll see at the top of page 14 is $108,825, which compares very, very closely with the department's model generated rent of $111,568. My rent, just for reference, it is if you care to go there, but you need not do so. It's based on the rents in place shown on page 11 with 2016, 2017 leases. And again, on page 12, we've got these would be the same set of comparables with an average rent of $1,194, a median of $1,278. So certainly we concluded that the average rent is shown on page 14 at $1,274 is within the range and would be appropriate for this valuation. As I say, the potential rent comes in very close to the modeled rate. The capitalization rate in this case then being the biggest difference, we're suggesting 7.75. In this case, Madam Chair, I'd suggest that as distinguished from the previous case, we are at a net rental rate here that's higher. And the other thing I would like to point out, there are two restaurants, the Coconut Island in Unit 1607 and Latang Chinese Food. Restaurants, as the board has heard me certainly say in the past, were particularly hard hit by the pandemic. So in this particular instance, I would suggest the capitalization rate based on the indicators in our study and the capitalization rate ranges for the lower quality properties at 7.75%, which then results in a suggested value of $1,181,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reimer? I guess on page 23 of your brief, if you look to again COVID questionnaire, they did check off minor impact for this property due to COVID, correct?
They certainly, and I guess I'd answer that, Mr. Ducharme. No one had shut down there yet, but it certainly wouldn't. So yes, totally agree. That's what they responded. Would not agree that that would be a reflection of the risk for the property with the two restaurants in place. But I agree with that's what they responded.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt.
No questions either. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Moving right along. Item number 4, 2235 Pembina Highway. Are there any preliminary issues on this? No.
Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
The file number is 22-1534. The roll number is 030-629-51500. The address is 2235 Pembina Highway. For the roll year 2023 with a reference date April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $9,758,000. The parcel use is neighborhood shopping center. The zoning is C3, and we have a leasable area 39,592 square feet. Our recommendation is to maintain the 2023 assessed value. On page 2, we have a couple of aerial photos of the subject property located at 2235 Pembina at the intersection of Markham Road. On page 3, we have some street view photos of the subject property from a few different angles. We can see the subject property consists of one-story buildings, as well as a 3-story building and a gas kiosk. Page 4, our request for information, our subject sales history. There are no sales history for the subject property. And below that, we have some gas station kiosk comparables. On page 5, we have our rent comparables. That includes both retail and office medical comparables. All comparables are the same parcel use code as the subject. All comparables are the same zoning as the subject. All comparables located on Pembina Highway and in close proximity to the subject. The mean rent for the NSC comparables is $20.13 per square foot. Our model's applying a $19.53 per square foot blended rate. The mean rent for the office medical comparables is $18.81 per square foot. Our model's applying a $16.39 per square foot blended rate. On page 6 is the subject property income summary for the store kiosk pump with the pump. We have a leasable area of 66 square feet with a rent of $237.33, giving a potential rent of $15,664. We have a vacancy loss of 2%, expenses at 3%, a shortfall of $6 per square foot, giving a net operating income of $14,882. We've applied a cap rate of 4.90%, giving an estimated value of $455,000 rounded. On page 7 is income stream 2, the NSC neighborhood shopping center summary. We have a total leasable area of 17,374 square feet, giving a potential rent of $339,389. This produces a $19.53 per square foot blended rate. We have a vacancy loss of 5%, expenses at 3%, a shortfall at $9 per square foot, giving a net operating income of $304,929. We've applied an overall cap rate of 6.70%, giving an estimated value for this stream of $4,551,000 rounded. On page 8, income stream 3, the office dental medical summary. We have a total leasable area of 22,152 square feet, giving a potential rent of $363,161, producing a $16.39 blended rent rate. We have a vacancy of 5.5%, expenses at 3%, a shortfall of $8 per square foot, giving a net operating income of $323,144. And we've applied an overall cap rate of 6.80%. This gives an estimated value for this stream of $4,752,000. On page 3 is a summary of the 3 income streams. We have a potential rent of $718,214. We have a vacancy loss of 5.19%. We've applied expenses of 3%, a shortfall of $8.56, giving a net operating income of $642,955. We've applied a cap rate of 6.69%, giving an estimated market value of $9,758,000. On page 10, you'll note the cap rate that we've applied for the subject properties at 6.69%, which is in the middle for the City of Winnipeg study and the higher end for the other reports. Page 11, the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 12 through 21 are the return 2020 income and expense mailers that were received back from the subject property. And this would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Ducharme?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Non-recoverable and cap rate asked and answered, please. And Mr. Ducharme, could we turn to page 9, please, of your submission? And just to be clear, I think you've gone through it all, but this is then the summary page of all the valuations, and these are all model-driven parameters from top to bottom, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So the only question, and if you don't know, I understand, but on the 4.9, we can agree that this is a property that's operated as a single economic unit, the office, the retail, and the gas bar.
Yes.
And I take it then the 4.9%, that's a model-driven cap rate that's specific to gas kiosk operations, is that right?
Yes.
It is, of course, considerably
I would
lower.
assume so, yes.
Yeah, okay. I won't belabor it because I understand that's not, you weren't involved in the modeling process. Madam Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
No, I don't either. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions either. Would you please proceed? Ms.
Thanks,
Warren?
Madam Chair. So agree with Mr. Ducharme's, the front page or the first page of his brief, he states that the actual year built for the subject is 1984 to 2002, and I agree with that, but it's subject to these observations. The entire property actually, other than the small Domo gas bar, was built in 1984. So effectively, we're dealing with a 1984 property. The only construction in 2002 was the Domo gas bar. I have the advantage because I'm still dealing with paper rather than the computer screens. I'll keep Mr. Ducharme's brief open at page 9 to help. The issues are actually significantly quite narrow. If I could ask the board members initially, please, and Mr. Ducharme, if you could turn to page 22 of our submission. And this is the same summary page of the valuation that I referenced in my questions relating to page 9 of the department's materials. So fundamentally, 3 issues. One relates to market rent, but that can be distilled to a main difference in the neighborhood shopping center component. I can tell the board that we're within $200 of each other on the OFM, the medical office building, so that is a non-issue. We're actually applying a gas bar rent that's higher than what the department's model had suggested. The department had applied 15,664. We're applying, as shown on the right-hand column there under SKP, a potential rent of 22,000. We're also applying the same adjustment for pumps, tanks, canopies of 151,000. The difference in the valuations then relates to the potential rent, and within that, the neighborhood shopping center component. There we do have a significant difference. The overall vacancy allowance, though, we're applying 5% across the board. That is slightly less than the department's blended vacancy rate of 5.19%. The reason for that being that the department's applied 5.5% in its model-driven value for the OFM building. We're treating it as one economic unit. We're applying 5%. The non-recoverables obviously are an issue. The other significant difference is capitalization rate. The blended rate for the board's reference, based on all the 3 different rates that the model had kicked out, was 6.69%. We're suggesting that this is an average quality retail property based on the tenancies and looking at the property as a whole, and we're suggesting 7% in this case rather than 6.69%. On the cap rate issue, I'll leave it for the board to consider based on the previous comments with respect to our capitalization rate study. On the neighborhood shopping center rent issue, then I'll hone in on that to the extent that that represents a major difference. If we could, again, in our main submission, if we could turn back to page 11, please. So the chart on page 11 sets forth how we calculated the potential income for the NSC or neighborhood shopping center component. We come in at a total potential income there of 289,000. As you can see on the chart, there was one lease that was a 2014 lease, but you can also see that there were a whole lot of leases. The rest of them are all between 2017 and a couple in 2019. And certainly, again, if you recall from our previous submission on the capitalization rate, one of the trends that was being certainly came forward very clearly with our interviews of the investors was a perception that net rental rates were going to have a lot of pressure and there would likely be some declines. So when you're looking at some of these leases that were negotiated in 2017, 18, and 19, certainly we would suggest that an investor as of the reference date wouldn't expect on renewal that these leases would be going up by any significant measure and might actually be declining. So we do believe and conclude that the total potential rent of 289,000, as shown on the chart there, based on these leases that were negotiated on those dates, represents a very fair potential marketing for the subject. We did then on page 12, we've got a number of properties that were of similar vintage, and the rental rate range there is somewhat higher than the previous properties, but that stands to reason given the quality of this property. Ranges from between $10.50 a foot and $19, with an average of $15.71 and a median of 16. So certainly we believe it's a fair representation based upon the rental rates being achieved and the other market indicators. So then, because that represents basically the only difference, one thing I will point out, I had on page 19, I had indicated that the market rent that we're applying for the gas bar, that's a very small, it's a typical normal gas bar operation, very small gas bar operation. There was a November 2020 renewal, so just prior to the reference date of 22,000. That is the rate we've applied in lieu of the lower rate that the model had suggested on it. So then if we turn to page 22, again, the difference in the potential rent boils down to the NSC, which is the neighborhood shopping center component. We believe we're being very fair with that, and capitalization rate of 7% in this case, and request that the value then be reduced to $8,403,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Ron or Mr. Bouchard?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre.
I just have one question. On page 2 of your brief, you're showing requested assessment of $4,803,000. I assume that's a typo.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. You know, I had a note to change that, and thank goodness you're here to remind me, because yes, you're exactly right. Please stroke out 4,803,000, and if you might please make a note, the request is 8,403,000. Exactly right.
Thank you very much. That was my only question.
Ms. Nesbitt.
I have to admit, when I looked at that number on that first page, I went, what the heck is he asking for? But then I realized later it was wrong. I do have a question just on the cap rate, Mr. Reimer.
Yes.
I noticed that the city does use different cap rates depending on the income stream, whereas Altus has applied a consistent cap rate of 7. And I appreciate what you said, it being a single economic unit, and I understand that. But do these properties operate fundamentally differently, that they could be hived off and therefore maybe less risk?
Do they operate fundamentally differently? That's a fair question, and I think certainly one could make the argument that if you've got two very, very different performing assets within the same role, I would agree with that. But if we turn briefly to I'll get the right page reference number here. Page 7, Ms. Nesbitt and Madam Chair, if you might all turn to page 7 in the overhead at the bottom of page 7. Actually, yeah, let's start with page 7. So you can see that fundamentally, the property is one it's one building. It was all constructed at the same time. It was constructed as an integrated, obviously an integrated operation. So in this case, it wouldn't be feasible at all to hive off any of it. It's part of the very same building. So it's no different, I'd suggest, than if you had, the regular retail strip that was all on one floor and larger with different types of dental, medical, and, tenancies. It's akin to that. If you turn then to the previous page, to page 6, you can see the photos. The 3-story office is sort of towards that would be towards the south end of the property, and the retail strip or the neighborhood shopping center extends to the north and east, as well as a wee bit to the south of the office building still. So I understand your point, and I'd suggest, though, it wouldn't be feasible in this case.
Just given basically the configuration and the property construction itself. And
Yeah.
even the gas bar, given its location, is that where the red dot is right there?
It's exactly right. It's obliterating, and that's just a function of the mapping program. It's obliterating the gas bar. That's right there. And I was going to say, not with this property, but in some circumstances, I suppose you could hive off the gas bar, but here, obviously, you couldn't. It's just part of the, it's right close to the property line, and I'm not imagining the city or the owners would get the city to approve any subdivision there. With respect to gas bar operations, and I know it didn't come up, and I didn't belabor it with Mr. Ducharme, I have a very high degree of concern with a 4.9% cap rate on any gas bar operation. I just don't believe that's a fair representation for these types of operations, especially in the context of environmental concerns. At the end of the day, though, the blended cap rate, it's a very small cog in a much larger wheel as far as the evaluation for the entire property. So
Right.
I didn't belabor it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reimer. No additional questions, Madam Chair.
My only comment would be that given that your rental rates that you applied to the gas bar is considerably higher, you actually end up with a higher number in any case on the gas bar than the city.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any summary required? No?
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are now, I think we'll just take a short break if that suits everybody.
7 minutes.
7 minutes, all right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll call the hearing back to order. We're moving on to 2716 Pembina Highway. And go ahead when you're ready, Mr. Ducharme.
Thank you. File number is 22-954. Rule number 030-426-50000. The address is 2716 Pembina Highway. For the roll year 2023 with a reference date of April 1st, 2021. We have an assessed value of $4,728,000. The parcel use is a neighborhood shopping center. Zoning is C2. And we have a leasable area of 15,346 square feet. I do have a recommendation to decrease the 2023 assessed value to $4,263,000. That's some rent adjustment.
Mr. Reimer.
Again, appreciate it. And I think our issues are going to be narrowed a lot. I'd still like to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Page 2. We have some aerial photos of the subject property at 2716 Pembina Highway at the corner of Dalhousie Drive. The subject is located in the Fort Richmond neighborhood. On page 3, we have a few street view photos of the subject property heading north on Pembina. Page 4, the request for income information on the subject sales history. There is no sales history, at least recent, for the subject property. Page 5, we have our rent comparables for the subject property. As you can see, the comparables are located on Pembina Highway and in close proximity to the subject. All the comparables have the same parcel use code as the subject. On page 6 is the subject property income summary, which has been revised. So if we look at, revise the first premise ID 1145. So we felt that the model rents were too aggressive for the first two, premises, just to sum it up. So we matched those to the actuals, and we also felt the model cap at 6.45 was too aggressive for this property, and we've adjusted that to 6.75 to just go through the specific changes then. For premise ID 1145, the model rent is $27.48. That's been adjusted to $24, which is the actual rent. This changes the potential rent from $118,714 to $103,680. For premise ID 1146, we changed the rent, the model rent from 1886 to 1820, which is a minor change, but it did change the potential rent from 104,220 to 100,573. This gives a potential rent of change from 338,439 to 319,758. Vacancy remains the same at 5%. Expenses remain the same at 3%. Shortfall remains the same at $9 per square foot. We've changed the cap rate from this changes the net operating income from $304,965 to $287,751. We've changed the cap rate to 6.75% from 6.45%. And this has changed the estimated value from $4,728,000 to $4,263,000 rounded. Page 7 is our capitalization rate chart. Page 7, the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 9 through 21 are the Return 2020 income and expense mailers. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Romer, do you have any questions?
I have just a minute, Madam Chair. I do not have, and again, appreciate the review by Mr. Ducharme. I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Please go ahead, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm going to suggest this. If we might turn to page 15. So the department's suggested rents, revised suggested potential rent is now within $8,500, give or take. So the remaining, there's that difference, there's the non-recoverable expense, and there's capitalization rate, which I'm suggesting should be 7%. I believe 6.75% has merit. However, I'm still concerned with the calculation of the NOI. So my suggestion, if you might make a note, is to take my apply my net operating income of $268,200, which is going to have the inclusion of the 5% slightly lower potential net market rent, but then apply that same cap rate of 6.75, because I understand where Mr. Ducharme's coming from on that. That then results in a revised value of $3,970,3970000, and that would be my request this afternoon as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ducharme, do you have any questions for Mr. Reimer?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I'm sorry, Mr. Reimer, could you please repeat that number? Your NOI at 268,200?
Yeah, and then applied with a 6.75 cap.
Yeah.
And the resulting number is 3,970,397 $970,397,000.
Okay, I get a different number, which is why I think I'm asking.
Oh,
But when I calculated, I got 3,973,000, but
Correct. I got the same number, Ms. Nesbitt.
yes, 3,973,000. Thank you.
no, that's okay. I just thought, wait, I must have misheard you somewhere in this. Okay, then I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no
Oh,
question.
actually, I do. Mr. Reimer, why do you believe a 6.75 cap is reasonable?
So I looked at, there's a few things, and it's a very good question. I looked at a few items so if you recall, Ms. Nesbitt and Madam Chair, for standard quality properties, our range is 6.75 to 7.25. When I'm making a judgment call about where a particular property fits, I'm looking, as you can appreciate, a variety of factors, age of property condition, but more importantly, for our purposes, strength of covenant, especially in the context of the pandemic, and whether we're applying, what kind of sort of rental rates relative to both within the property and outside the property we're looking at. So the reason for my change is, if we go to page 11 very briefly, I looked, and as Mr. Ducharme was going through his recommendation, I looked specifically at the covenants in this case, and you can see there that the leases are they're all negotiated between 2017 and 2020, but they're all 5 or even some are even one at least is even a 10-year term. That between that and you kind of look at the tenants, it indicates stronger covenants. And so therefore I'm choosing a rate that's at the lower end as opposed to the middle of the standard quality range. I'm choosing the cap rate at the lower end of that standard quality given those covenants. So that was the reason overall for the change.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. No further questions now, Madam Chair.
And I have no questions, so we're moving to the 864 Pembina Highway. When you're ready, Mr. Ducharme.
We have file number 22-2581. Roll number 030-929-93560. The address 2864 Pembina. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $2,876,000. Parcel use is neighborhood shopping center, zoning C4. We have a leasable area of 6,645 square feet. Our recommendation is to maintain the 2023 assessed value. On page 2, we have a couple of aerial photos of the subject property located at 2864 Pembina, just south of the intersection with Killarney Avenue in the Fort Richmond neighborhood. On page 3, we have a few street view photos of the subject property from a few different angles. Page 4, the request for income information, followed by the subject sales history. On page 5, we have our rent comparables. All the comparables are the same parcel use as the subject. Some of the comparables are newer improvements similar to the subject. The comparables provided include coffee chains and restaurants, which are similar to the subject property. It should be noted that most of the comparable coffee chains do have drive-thrus, which this one does not. However, Unit 570, 350 comparable, Northtown, does not have a drive-thru at that location. The comparables are of similar size to the subject property, and several of the comparables are in close proximity to the subject property. Page 6 is the subject property income summary. We have a leasable area of 6,645 square feet, giving a potential rent of $207,699, giving a blended rent rate of $31.26 per square feet. We have vacancy at 5%, expenses at 3%, shortfall at $9, giving a net operating income of $188,405. We've applied a cap rate of 6.55%, giving an estimated value of $2,876,000 rounded. Page 7, our capitalization rate chart. You'll note that the cap rate applied to the subject property is 6.55, which is on the lower end of the chart. But the improvements were completed in 2020, and we feel that would be fair. Page 8, the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 9 through 15 are the subject property 2020 income and expense mailers, which were received back. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryman, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Non-recoverables and cap rate asked and answered. Mr. Ducharme, could we turn to your page 6 briefly? I'm pretty sure I know the answer to these, but just because of the nature of the issues here. So if you have the records in front of you, the last premise, that's ID 298915, I believe that's the coffee culture space, correct? Or
I'm sorry. Premise ID, is that what you're
yeah,
referring to?
298915. That's the 2,212 square foot unit. That's the coffee culture
Yes.
space. Okay, that's what I thought. Then, the space above that 298914. I think that's the Wayback Burger space. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's these last two. So I'm pretty sure, but correct me if your records are not the same. I believe the bar burrito space is the next one up, your premise ID 298813. Is that what you also
Yeah,
showed?
298913, yes.
Or sorry, 913. So
Yeah.
that's the bar burrito.
Yeah.
So the one remaining unit, that's the very top one, then that's the one that is unoccupied at the present time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Were you aware that this is still a shell unit incapable of occupancy?
I was not aware of that, no.
Okay. That then makes my remaining questions moot. So thanks, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have a question?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Please proceed, Mr. Ryman, when you're ready.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So the issues here are a little further afield, but they're not difficult. Recall my questions. There's the one unoccupied space. That's the unit of the department's got it as 1,402 square feet. We have it a bit larger. If we could turn to my submission on page 11, please. So it's a little odd in that the market rents we're applying for the finished space that is either occupied or has since been made capable of occupancy are units, as you see on the chart on page 11, it's units 30, 50, and 20. We've actually applied a market rent that's higher than the model driven rates for those units at $34 a foot. And the reference we had for the $34 was the Wayback Burger space that was known as of the reference date at the $34 rate. So we've applied that to those 3 units. Here's where it gets a little, as I say, a little off the beaten path. Unit 10 is 1,421 square feet. That is vacant shell. It's demised, but it's not finished. There's no distribution of HVAC. You couldn't get an occupancy permit for it at the present time. I did check with the owner last week just to make sure that nothing physically had changed and confirm that in fact, yes, it is still vacant shell. So we're treating that as essentially unfinished heated storage, which is the only theoretical, I suppose, use you could put to it. I don't think the city would even permit that, but in any event, it's physical space. The physical condition of that space is such that it's just not capable of occupancy at the present time. I would expect, obviously, in due course, if and when, or not if, but hopefully whenever a tenant is secured and the space is built out, I would expect the department would review its permit records and account for that. But for the purpose of the physical asset as we sit today, we must value that asset as it physically exists, and that's as a shell unit for that unit of 1,421 square feet. So then, if we go to page 14, So again, this is then the $34 rate applied to the 3 units that are capable of occupancy or occupied. Using that $34 rate, that's again, actually a fair bit higher than the model rates for those units. But applying the $6 notional storage rate for the unfinished unit, and then running it through the other differences, of course, the non-recoverable expense and the cap rate. So recall, Madam Chair, and Ms. Nesbitt's comments were on the previous hearing were very well received. I am applying here a capitalization rate at the lower end of the standard quality range, at the very upper end of the high quality, there in that 675 range. That is, of course, based on, again, my opinion as to when one looks at the physical asset, which is no doubt it's new construction and it's a good quality asset, but when one looks also at the durability of the income stream and the rental rates, and Madam Chair, you picked up on it, and in the earlier hearing, the rental rates we're applying in this case are certainly premium rates from our perspective. One of the units has been in shell condition since it was constructed, going on 3 years now. So there has been some challenges with respect to lease up, and so in terms of that $34 rate representing the premium rent, we do believe the 675 is a fair capitalization rate effectively for those 3 units at the $34 rate. The as I say, the $6 rate is going to be hopefully an interim measure until such time as they secure a tenant for that unit and it's built out and they get an occupancy permit and it's capable of occupancy. But in the interim, then now we're with that $6 rate, as you can see on page 14. Our request is to go to a value of $2,465,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have questions, Mr. Duchamp?
No, I don't have any questions. Maybe a summary.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre?
So on your chart on page 14, your indicated market value is 2,465,000 rounded.
Yes.
And on your next page, it's 2,485,000.
Correct.
Sorry, Carrie.
No. Mr. McIntyre, you are, again, have a very keen eye. 2,465,000, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That all your questions?
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I had the same question. Thank you. So you indicated you had a summary?
Yes. So when there's a vacant shell, my understanding, what we've applied in the past is we've taken the total assessed value and deducted what the cost would be to finish that shell. And my understanding is we've generally used an $80 per square foot cost to finish the shell or to fit up a shell, according to however wording it might be. So when I look at this, it'd be $80, and this is 1,421 square feet. That would give us a value of 113,680. So that's something, now understanding that it's a vacant shell, we would be willing to deduct from the assessed value. So that would be 2,876,000 and deduct the 113,680, and that would give a revised value of 2,762,300, I believe, rounded.
Could you please repeat those numbers, Mr. Duchamp? Sorry.
Okay.
And what square footage did you use for the vacant space? Your number or Mr. Reimer's number?
Yeah, I used the one Mr. Reimer's providing here.
Okay, so what number was that again?
So I used $80 and I times it by the square foot of the premise, $1,421. And that gave me 113,680. Now, if I take that, and I'm just gonna double check.
you're right.
So if I deduct the 113,680 from the original assessed value, 2,876,000, I get a value of 2,762,320. Which would be 2,762,000, I guess, rounded.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer.
Quick reply. So thank you, Mr. Ducharme, for that. Appreciate it. A couple of things. And Mr. Ducharme, so I've had the advantage of dealing with this issue over a couple of cycles. And what I can say, Madam Chair, is Mr. Ducharme's bang on that the $80 rate was used in previous cycle. And Mr. Ducharme won't have the benefit of this, but more recently, the allowance that's been used is $100 a square foot. But I have no specific documentation I can point to. I can just tell you from personal experience this cycle, it has gone up because of construction costs and such. So thank you again, Mr. Ducharme. I guess I'd suggest when one looks at it that way, the $100 would be the standard. But then the other factor that comes into play, Madam Chair, after 2 years, under our legislation, after 2 years, property or improvements that have been made, whether they're capable of occupancy or not, become assessable. So the assessor is bound, as they have done here, they're bound to put it on the roll, even if it's not capable of occupancy. But the impact, and while I appreciate what Mr. Ducharme has done, if we were going to simply make the capital deduction at between $80 and $100 a foot, but then value it as if it was finished space at the higher rates, one would have to then account for a much more significant vacancy, because don't forget, this unit fully represents 1,400 feet, call it 1421 out of 6811 is 20% of the space that has been vacant from the very start of the when the building was available for occupancy. That would impact my vacancy allowance request for sure. I've chosen to take a different approach where I've just effectively taken it as nominal storage, but not increased the vacancy allowance to, that would be double dipping again, I believe. So I've kept the vacancy at 5% because I'm treating the unfinished unit as just a bare storage space and nothing more. So again, appreciate Mr. Ducharme's comments, but if one were inclined to use the capital deduction method, then certainly I believe one would have to make an adjustment on the vacancy allowance, because one is treating it as if it was finished when it's not. So with those comments, thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to number 7. 971 Corridor, switching street. When you're ready, Mr. Ducharme.
Thank you. The file number is 22-2464. The roll number is 120-301-17000. The address is 971 Corridor. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $4,213,000. Parcel use is a neighborhood shopping center. Zoning is C2. We have a leasable area of 17,650 square feet, and a recommendation to maintain the 2023 assessed value. Page 2, top and middle, we have a couple aerial photos of the subject property located at 971 Corridor. It's at the intersection of Stafford Street and is located in the Crescentwood neighborhood. On page 3, we have some street view photos of the subject property from Corridor for the top 2 photos, and from Stafford on the bottom photo. The property has a pharmacy and medical center, and the medical center entrance you can see in the middle photo of page 3. Page 4, we have requests for information, and then the subject sales history. There are no recent sales history of this subject. Page 5, the comparables provided include pharmacies, which are similar to the subject, and rents range from $21 per square foot to $28 per square foot. And on the bottom of page 5, we have included comparables that have leasable basements, which the subject property does have according to our records. Page 6, the subject property income summary. We have a total leasable area of 17,650 square feet, giving a potential rent of $305,794, producing a blended rate rent of $17.33 per square foot. We have vacancy at 5%, expenses at 3%, shortfall at $9 per square foot, giving a net operating income of $273,846. We have a cap rate of 6.5%, giving an estimated value of $4,213,000 rounded. Page 7 is our capitalization rate chart. You'll note the 6.5% that applied falls within the lower and upper boundaries of all reports for retail neighborhood. Page 8, the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Pages 9 through 22 are the 2020 income and expense mailers that were returned. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have questions, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Madam Chair. The questions will be limited to, so Mr. Ducharme, on your page, just to be clear, on page 6 then, the valuation, this is all model driven, including the application of what the model, the regression model kicked out for basement areas and such. And so all of that information is model driven, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we can agree though that this is a single occupant Rexall drugstore. That's the property we're dealing with, correct?
A single.
It's just Rex. It's a single occupant building and it's occupied entirely by Rexall.
Well, we have our records indicate a Riverwood Medical Center.
Really?
Well, you can see in the pictures too signage. The bottom.
Are they within the Rexall though?
Well, it's part of the building. It's they're located right at the back.
Mm-hmm.
Like the middle of page 3, there's you can't really see, there's a signed.
No, I can certainly see at the bottom of page 3.
Yeah, that's the entrance to that location.
Right. So then though, I'm pretty sure that that would represent a sublease arrangement between Rexall and the tenant. If we go to page 19, and this is the information submitted by the owner. I'm quite certain. So again, I guess I'd ask if you have different records, then for sure we need to discuss. But I'm pretty certain, as between the landlord and the tenant, whatever the sublease arrangements might be between Rexall and the subtenant, but the landlord, the only occupant and the only entity that's paying rent on this property is Rexall Pharmacy, correct?
Yes, according to this, yes, this mailer, yes, this rental.
Okay, and so, and then if we go back briefly, back or forward? If we go forward then to page 21, this would be the income statement supplied in response to that same questionnaire, and that shows a total year to date, which would be their fiscal year ends December 31st of $266,361, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'll explain this further in a second. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre,
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt,
No additional questions, thank you.
and I have no additional questions. Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So if we could go to my main submission to the second last page, that's going to be page 24, please. And what I can confirm, as between the property owner and their tenant, which is Rexall, it is a single occupant building, and the only rent that's being collected is from Rexall and no other party. The medical center would be a sublease arrangement between Rexall and that entity, and that's not something the landlord's privy to. As shown on page 24, then at the end of the day, the basement area, I mean, it's certainly, we're not disputing the basements there, but at the end of the day, the landlord is collecting the rent as shown there from Rexall only with a total leasable area, and that's the main floor area of 11,176. Now, on page 24, you can see the lease start and end dates. It was an original lease starting in April of 2003 and was ending on March 31st of 2018. And then there was a renewal. If one then turns back to our page 22, there was a 5-year renewal that Rexall exercised on this property, and that then changed the lease end date based on that renewal to March 31st of 2023. So you can see the handwritten comments there. The January 1st to March 31st of 2018 was the old lease, and then with the renewal, they were actually paying a higher rate of $24 a square foot. At that time, that had again stepped up by the reference date, and we're actually applying a $25 rate, the stepped rate that was in effect as of the reference date. So that represents Rexall has the use of the entire building, basement, main floor, and that represents all of the rent that's being paid on the subject property. If we go to going back then to our page 11. So on page 11, we've got at the middle of the page, Rexall PharmaPlus with the leasable area shown on the rent roll submitted by the owners of 11,176 being the main floor area, with the step rate under that 2018 renewal of $25 a foot, and that comes in then at a potential rent of $279,400. We've got a chart towards the bottom of page 11 with other comparable retail tenancies range between $1,875 at the low end, $27 at the high end. Indices 1, 7, 9, and 11, as indicated at the bottom of page 11, those are chain drugstore tenancies. If we turn to page 13 then, we've got the total potential rent of $279,400 being the stepped rate. That's, as one might expect, it's roughly $11,000 higher than what was reported in 2020, which is based on the fact that the step occurred in 2021. And then with the application of the remaining parameters, including a 6.75 cap rate, so we're a little bit higher than the department. We come in at a requested value of $3,529,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have questions for Mr. Reimer?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
Just one question. So the assessor indicated that there's 6,000 square feet of leasable space in the basement. Yet, I guess the question is, are you including that square footage in your potential rent?
In effect, Mr. McIntyre, the answer is yes, in that however you want to sort of break out the rent, the landlord and tenant are basing their rental structure on main floor only. That's the 11,176. Included in that is the full use of the entire basement area by Rexall at no additional charge. So whether you blended it out at a slightly lower rate on the main floor and added, allocated some of those rents to the basement, you could certainly do that. But the total rent that's being collected from Rexall is for the entire building, basement included. So we haven't added to that rent. That would be certainly something that wouldn't be consistent with the performance or with the circumstances of the property. So I haven't taken the rental amount and then added an additional amount that isn't being paid. Rexall gets the use of the whole building.
And have you been in the building?
I have not been in that, not other than the main floor. I haven't been in the basement.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you very much.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no further questions. Any summary required?
I would like to for this property. I'd just like to state, we feel there's significant value for this basement. It has a lab with a waiting room in the basement for the medical center. It has offices. It has a meeting room, staff room. There's washrooms down there. So we feel there's I just wanted to state, we feel there's significant value for this basement property.
Can I respond briefly?
Sure.
That value is captured in the rental rate being paid, as simple as that. If the landlord thought they could get $25 on the main as we applied and another $10 on the basement, they would do so. But that rate, the rate negotiated is for the use of the entire building, basement, main floor and everything. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have now heard all the items on our docket and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.